Oh, sorry. Happy Wednesday, everyone. I'm off in my own little world here. Good evening. So I have some announcements. October 1st, if you are going on the trip, on October 1st, the last $95 per person is due to Beth. So if you could turn that into her before the 1st, or by the 1st. October 14th, our craft fair is going to be here, and we have a ton of stuff going on, not just the vendors, but we also will have a food truck. We have vendors that will be inside and outside because, from my understanding, we had so many people that wanted to be a part of this. There will be a raffle, a door raffle, and the raffle will consist of something that each vendor donates. So because we don't require our vendors to pay a fee, they just give a donation, excuse me, for what they sell, and then we're going to put it in a raffle and raffle it off. And there's going to be someone here with like one of those duck pond games. I don't know if that'll be more fun for the kids or the adults. We'll see. So that is the 14th from 10 to 3 p.m. And then on October 15th, that Sunday, is Pastor Appreciation Day. If you'd like to give a love offering, you can see Pam or Marilyn, and we will be doing a potluck dinner right after service, but please do not bring desserts, right, Pam? No desserts. Those will be provided, but we would like you to bring a dish to share. October 21st is another men's golf tournament, and I was under the impression that Ron Baker won because I saw a picture of him holding a big trophy, and when I told him about it, he was very confused because apparently he did not win the golf tournament. No? Who won? Was there a winner? Is that a thing?
Yeah, Roger Reed's team.
Oh, Roger Reed's team. Congratulations. They won the last men's golf tournament. Pastor, were you on that team?
No, I wasn't, but you know, I'm glad you brought that up. I outdrove the guy who had the longest drive, but I was such, I don't know, a gentleman. I would not say that because he was young and I wanted him to feel that he had accomplished something great in his life.
You know, no one on...
The 72-year-old guy outdrive him.
No one online heard anything you said. They just heard that you didn't win. Okay. November 19th, this is a little ways down the road, but Friends and Family Day. You can mark your calendars and start inviting your friends. Will we have Jonathan White that day? Yeah, we typically have Jonathan White, and so yeah, that's a great day to invite your friends and family. And my last announcement is that it is Lonnie's birthday, and if you missed it, we all just sang to her in the foyer. So make sure you wish her happy birthday. And are there snacks still out there? And there are snacks after service out there in the foyer to celebrate Lonnie's 28th birthday. That's what I heard. All right, I'll turn it over to Andy.
Thank you, Chelsea. All right. It has been a good day. Has everybody had a good day? I've had a good day. Pastor and I have had a very early day. We had our mayor's prayer breakfast as part of the chaplaincy program. He probably got up a couple hours before I even did because I've only got a couple of goats and a couple dozen chickens to feed. He's got a flock of sheep, but he also drives from, what did it take you, about 2 hours to get there? Yeah, he said he was behind every school bus between here and, I don't know, he got behind a lot. So it's been a long day, but it's been a great day, so I hope you guys have had a great day also. If this is too loud or if there's too much with both mics here, just let me know. We're going to start off with a little bit of fun tonight because I don't want to be heavy all the time, and we're just going to stay away from all the local news. We could talk about that all night. Hopefully you're not watching the news every night. I think that's probably pretty unhealthy, so I would suggest taking a break from that. So we'll get into a little more of a fun topic, which is a recent trend. Has anybody heard about this? Apparently somebody posted a TikTok video asking husband, boyfriend, I can't remember which, how often do you think of the Roman Empire? Anybody familiar with this? Chelsea and I are the only ones? This is big right now, and it's kind of fun. So I wanted to read just a couple of the responses. This is going around right now. It's going really viral. And as it turns out, women, apparently, daughters, wives, girlfriends, are all surprised because they're finding that men answer this question in a particular way. So who wants to be a guinea pig? Since you haven't heard of this. Anybody? Brother Steve was the first hand. Brother Steve, how often do you think of the Roman Empire?
Probably once a month.
Once a month. Okay, a little bit lower. All right, somebody's got their hand up back here.
Every time Derek talks about the railroad, because the railroad, but not the ties, were set by the Roman chariot wheels.
Chariot wheels, yes, that's right. He's told me that before too. Her son is into trains, and he's probably shared that with a few of us. Yeah. So more than once a month you get to hear that. I'll read this one to you because, well, I'll tell you why I picked this one out of the ones I picked. Some men enthusiastic about the empire have backed it up with evidence. Why wouldn't I think about the Roman Empire, one user asked, praising the Romans for creating aqueducts and running water and making concrete known for its strength and ability to be set under water. Those are almost my exact words. You can ask Chelsea. But this is a Forbes magazine article. So apparently I'm not the only one out there thinking that. A lot of answers were real straightforward. This article from Forbes says one TikTok user asked her brother how often he thinks of the empire, and he says, well, probably 2 or 3 times a week, and she didn't believe him, so he led her into a room where he turns on his computer and shows her a coliseum he has built on Minecraft that has taken him weeks. So he rested his case. So apparently there's about, there's another video alone which garnered, it says 1.5 million likes, which actually satirizes the trend, and it shows, apparently I haven't seen this, but it describes this in the article. It describes a group that are watching football, men and women, and as soon as the women get up and walk out of the room, the men switch the football game to a documentary about the Roman Empire. And I'm not sure why it's such a crazy trend. I can't really explain it. It's not like us men had a secret meeting and said, let's get into the Roman Empire, did we, guys? Wink, wink. Don't tell the ladies. Just kidding. It just turns out that you think...
I would be curious to poll all the men
Yeah.
here.
Pull all the men, okay.
All the men.
Well, let's try it.
I never think about
You never, most women probably don't. All right, Chris Larner, how often do you think of the Roman Empire?
I'd say once a month.
Once a month, okay, he's close to where Steve is. Brother Ronnie?
I think when I see the Republicans and Democrats gonna eat the same rule.
Modern day politics, chaos. It's like a circus, right? Bread and circuses. How about in the back, our sound guys? How often? Hardly at all, okay. When you watch Gladiator. And how often? The thing is, he watches Gladiator movies every day. That's what he's not telling you. All right, anybody else that's done more? Brother Tapman, how about you?
Very often.
Not very often. Brother Bob?
Not very often.
Not very. That surprises me. And Pastor, how about you? Quite often. Okay, I would have guessed that one. Brother Earl, how about you? You mind telling us? Count tonight, none. That is a classic Earl answer. Who am I missing? Who am I leaving out? Almost forgot you, didn't I, buddy? How often?
I had the same as Chris when I watched Gladiator.
Just gladiators. Really? Okay. Steve said he's only maybe once or twice a month, right, Steve? Yeah. Am I leaving anyone else out? Okay, I think I covered all the guys. Oh, Miss Dave, yeah, right here, sitting right here. Nice try, buddy. Okay, for those of you who can't hear online, he said the Romans, I can't believe the way they built stuff. I'll interpret. He thinks of them every day like I do. He's trying to be real careful because he's realizing these guys all think about it once a month, but I think about it all the time. I was thinking about it before you even brought it up, says Dave. It's okay, so was I. Yes, sister.
The Roman Empire, I think of the Vatican and the Pope, a lot of the things that were formerly seen.
Yeah, we get a little bit later history with the Holy Roman Empire and the Roman Catholic Church. Yeah, well, that's a good tie. Yeah, we get into church history and everything else, so it would be hard not to really think about that if you just pulled back maybe even just a layer or two, right, sis? Yeah, that's a good point. All right, I like that. So anyway, this trend is pretty crazy, and for those of you who think that I'm weird and Dave's weird, thanks for being my everybody in this. A lot of things every day that are happening that we see, everything from architecture clear down to common words we use in our language. We can go through an entire Roman glossary. I just threw these up here for the fun of it. You can explore that on your own, maybe learn a little bit of something here and there. But obviously it has a big impact. And what really was interesting about this is I realized there are more like-minded people like me than I realized. I thought it was amusing how a lot of these wives, girlfriends, and daughters, my oldest daughter was the first one to ask me the question, and I hadn't heard of the trend. I just thought, yeah, she's just curious, I'll give her an answer. I'm like, what am I not thinking of it? What do you mean? Is this a trick question? Well, then Chelsea got in on it, and so we had a lot of fun with it. So that part was pretty amusing. But I got to thinking about it, I thought, why would that be such a shock to somebody who finds out that, yeah, I actually think about it a lot. Why is that so weird? And I got to thinking it has to be one of two things. It's either because they had lower expectations and they thought, oh, wow, he thinks of the Roman Empire, okay, smart guy. Or they had really high expectations and they're disappointed. I don't know which. I guess it's a matter of interpretation. So what we're going to talk about tonight is exactly that very thing, that question that I came to when it comes to lowered expectations. By the way, if you didn't get a worksheet, not a worksheet rather, but an outline, there are some outlines and there's a couple handy charts. We're going to be showing at least one of those up here tonight for the viewers online, so they won't have to worry about missing out on that. You can always come here and get one if you like, though. And so if you refer to those at some point, feel free to hold on to those, make notes, or whatever you'd like to do on those. And we can probably go to our next slide if we could, please. One of the things when we're talking about low expectations, we have a little bit of fun with it, and I think that is a fun way to lead into this study and where we're going to go tonight. The modern mantra really is they're saying that the key to happiness is just always have low expectations. Has anybody heard this before? Just have low expectations, you won't ever be disappointed. Somebody's heard it before. I heard a chuckle. You have low expectations. How does that apply to a believer who follows Hebrews 12:2, who looks to who? Who looks to Christ as the author and what? Finisher of our faith. Our eyes are on him. How do we really set the bar that low? We're also supposed to do everything we do as if we're doing it to the Lord. So should we really as believers set the bar that low and say, I'm going to keep my expectations low? Is that biblical? Anybody think that that's biblical? Anybody says it's not biblical? Anybody say, what's biblical mean? I'm the one that had the long day. Pastor and I can get away with kind of checking out tonight, so we've got excuses. So anyway, how do you really lower those expectations? But what we find out, because we're picking up in 1 Kings 19, that this could be exactly what Elijah has set himself up for, these high expectations and now this disappointment. A couple studies ago, we had a little bit of exchange at the end of the session where we did some Q&A, and we talked about what could he have been going through, what was going through his mind. And we think of all those things. We think of depression, and we think of distraction, and we think of all these other things that could have come into play. Was he depressed? Was he distracted? Was he disillusioned? What was happening at this moment in his life, what we call this low point? Excuse me, because if we remember back to the previous chapter in 1 Kings 18, we recall this is the high water mark. This is where he is going to face those prophets on Mount Carmel, and this is going to be the apex of his prophetic career. And now we are in chapter 19, and we're going to see this downturn. And most of us here, and probably most of the people watching, kind of know how this story goes, that all of a sudden he's down off the mountaintop, and where is he now? He is not in a good place. So as we pick up a little bit, just to get that refresher out of the way, and with that confrontation, remember he's faced 850 false prophets. 450 were the prophets of Baal. And what has he done with them? Anybody remember? It's typical fodder for our Wednesday night Bible study. Yeah, they're gone. They're done for. Now, he's thinking in his mind, probably, we can assume, that this should be the clarion call for the nation. We are going to take our country back. How many's heard that recently? Let's take our country back. This should be the rallying cry right now. We should have Israelites all over the nation at this point finding out what happened. They're wearing jerseys with his name on them. All the babies being born at a record number are being named Elijah. He should be the guy, right? But we hear crickets. It's like teaching on a Wednesday night. Nothing. Just kidding. I love you guys. You guys are the best. He doesn't get that response. Where's the call to repentance? So we got into that whole part afterwards where now he's supernaturally speeding. He's at Superman speeds going to Jezreel. He's ahead of Ahab's chariot. You know Ahab is going there. Ahab's got to be the tattletale. And I think I know who wore the pants in that dynasty, and it wasn't him. And so he's trying to get to Jezebel. The Lord has girded up Elijah's loins. We read that already, that he is staying ahead of it. He's going to Jezreel. He's going almost the distance of a marathon to get there, and he arrives first. Ahab gets to Jezebel, and Ahab tells her everything. And we could actually probably go to our next slide for right now, since we're talking about Jezebel. She was mad, and what? This shouldn't be a surprise, guys. Ahab has told her everything. So when we start to pick up in chapter 19, and we understand what is exactly happening with this wicked queen and what's going to come out of her response, it's not going to be repentance. If you don't know the story, maybe Elijah was going to Jezreel because he thought this is going to not only spark a national repentance, but it's going to start with the leadership. They're going to see what happened. I don't know, but if we could ask him, we could maybe find out, did you think that it was going to spark a national repentance with the leadership, with those in charge of the dynasty? Yes, sir.
When Elijah put up his offering, and God come down and consumed it, and he killed all the Baal's prophets or whatever, and so he saw what God did, but as soon as Jezebel put a contract on him, he lost his faith, so to speak, and he split.
He did.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I would think if he saw what God did, why would he? I mean, of course, we do the same thing sometimes.
We do.
Yeah. God bails us out, and then we sort of doubt he can take care of us.
That's exactly right. That's actually what our entire study is going to focus on tonight.
One last thing.
Yeah.
I did a little study on Jezebel, and what I found, and just correct me if I got this wrong.
Yeah.
Her name means garbage in Hebrew.
It does. That's true.
Huh?
That is true. That is correct.
Okay.
It's a Phoenician name, but in Hebrew it is equivalent to the same word for garbage, yes. This is the one I'm wearing is? I apologize. Bear with me just a second, guys. We will get it fixed up. Thank you for pointing that out, Chelsea. You guys let me know if this is any better. I don't know if that was my beard or just do this if it does it again and it's still doing it? Oh, that's a thumbs up, okay. All right, so picking up and just to touch on what you said, the first part of what you said, that's exactly what we want to look at tonight. We want to talk about that mountaintop experience that Elijah has, because we all have those mountaintop experiences, but we also have those experiences more often. Sometimes we stay on those mountaintops a little longer than other mountaintops. What happens when you come down the mountaintop? What exactly happens? Who's been there before? Not everybody here has stayed on the mountaintop. You can't convince me of that. You've probably been on lots of different mountaintops, but you always end up having to come down off the mountaintop, don't you? I do. It's just part of what we have to go through. And that can be a little difficult sometimes. But we're going to talk about where that was for Elijah, what that meant, how that applies. And we're going to look at another example as well before we're done tonight, Lord willing. So if we pick up back in 1 Kings, we're going to start there where we left off, which should be chapter 19, verse 1. And as you turn to, I'll start to read. Most of you probably already know this. Verse 1 of chapter 19, 1 Kings says, "And Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done, and withal how he had slain the prophets with the sword. Then Jezebel sent a messenger unto Elijah, saying, So let the gods do to me and more also, if I make not thy life as the life of one of them by tomorrow about this time. She's furious. She has sent a messenger. She has contacted him on Facebook Messenger. She's done everything she can to let him know, you're dead in 24 hours, buddy. Your time's coming. And she swears by those gods, little g, those very gods that Elijah had squarely faced off against their prophets. But she's going to swear by them. And she takes this religious paganism that she practices very seriously. She's willing to incur the wrath because, make no doubt, she believes that they are real, that they are powerful. And now it's her move. And she's decided, death decree for this guy, he is going down. He was a pain in the neck before, but now we're not going to put up with him at all. So she doesn't repent. I think we all probably understood that already. If it's a spoiler for you, I apologize. But if we move on to verse 3, we can look at what happens following this vow for revenge that Jezebel makes. Verse 3, and when he saw that, he arose and went for his life and came to Beersheba, which belongeth to Judah, and left his servant there. So what's his response? Brother Ronnie already kind of figured that out for us. Maybe he panics, whatever the case may be, whatever's going through his mind, we can only speculate, but he does flee. And if you look at the map on that outline, you'll see that he's going to end up going quite a distance. He even leaves that servant behind. There's a tradition that says that servant, by the way, just because it's kind of interesting, we'll throw this out there, the servant was none other than that boy he raised from the dead, the son of the widow of Zarephath. For a lot of rabbis, tradition says that that young man is also Jonah. However, I'm going to caution you, if you want to take a deep dive on that on your own, go ahead, feel free. There really is not any historical or biblical evidence to support that this is Jonah, and it really doesn't match up with the biblical or historical timeline. That is just a rabbinical tradition. So if you want to explore that, feel free. It is kind of interesting, but nonetheless, it could very well be that it is, in fact, the son that he had raised from the dead. That could be very likely. We do know that it is also going to be the same servant that was watching for him on the mount, watching for the rain in the previous chapter. So we do have that connection there, but whether or not he's going to be that widow's son, possibly. Jonah, highly unlikely, but you may come across that as you study this sometime. Just a little heads up for you. So we move on to what this mindset is. We explore that just a little bit. We know that he realizes this is serious. This is no idle threat. This is an unbinding, unbreakable oath that she has made. She's made it very clear, and she means business. So maybe he's going to be scared. I probably would be a little bit worried. And we know from what James told us, we talked about this one other study in James chapter 5, he was a man with the same passions as us. He had the same issues that we have. So picture yourself in Elijah's shoes, and if you're wearing those sandals, you probably would feel the same way. You maybe would be shaking in them. So as we realize he's going to these extremes, going from north, if you look at that map, he's up near Dan and goes to Jezreel and ultimately ends up down in Beersheba. He goes extreme north to extreme south. Quite a distance, leaves that servant behind. Let me get up to the slide where I should be. We'll go on to verse 4. He says, but he himself went a day's journey. So he's left that servant behind. He himself went a day's journey into the wilderness and came and sat down under a juniper tree, and he requested for himself that he might die and said, it is enough now, O Lord, take away my life, for I am not better than my fathers. So after several days on the run, he finally collapses. He's exhausted. He feels defeated. Again, we can put all those adjectives in there and wonder exactly what's going through his mind, but we understand that he is at a low spot. In his desperation, what does he do? He foolishly asks for the Lord to take his life. That's a low spot. And maybe some of you have been there before. If you have been, I'm so glad you worked through it, but maybe that also gives you a little insight, that desperation and what you could possibly be feeling, or he could be feeling, that his eyes now, they're on the circumstances. They're not really on the Lord so much. And I know we've all been there, where our eyes drift from him, and now they're on those circumstances. And now we've made those circumstances bigger than the Lord. What a terrible tragedy that is for us. Yes, sir, we got another question up here. Yeah. I think that's a possibility. He could have felt like a complete failure, or at least part of a failure. He asked me if he felt like a failure, and I guess that's possible. I think that there is a part of him that certainly probably may have asked, is there part of God's plan that I just cannot fulfill? I don't know that Elijah would have been the type to think that God failed or God's plan failed, but as a man, am I doing what God has called me to do? Maybe I'm the problem. Those are some good guesses, probably. Yes, Pastor.
There was a study done just recently. They asked several ministers about how they're doing in the ministry.
Yeah.
Okay, and we have a lot of Elijahs out there,
Yeah, we do.
because let me just give you one that shared this way. It said, "I'm so occupied with my pastoral studies and duties that I find it nearly impossible to maintain my own relationship with God. I'm beginning to doubt my calling and even God's existence at times, as the things that I try to do, it doesn't change our people at all. And this is affecting my role as a pastor. Please help me."
Yeah.
Now, what he was saying was something very similar to Elijah. Said, I am no better than my fathers. I just did this great miracle,
Right.
but it didn't change the national paradigm.
Yeah.
There is that part when all the works that you do, all of a sudden, comes to that culminating point where you say, well, what's the use?
Yeah.
And I've talked to a lot of pastors. I had a lot of pastors come to our pastor's seminar, and the response from several was, I don't know how much longer that I can continue because the people are far from me.
Yeah.
And so I think that this was Elijah's problem more than Jezebel.
Yeah.
I do.
I think it's a good point. I think it's a really good point. But, Pastor, what you're saying is, if I'm tracking right, men of God are Elijahs. This can't be accurate, can it? They're Elijahs. They're prophets of God. They're the oracles of God. Can they possibly be flawed and have maybe
Well, not
deficiencies?
usually, but the next guy that responded
Yeah.
is the one that was supposed to cheer him up
Yeah?
and said, I have the same identical problem.
There you go.
So I don't know. I don't know that I would be cheered, to the high mountain experience by a guy who was exactly like me.
It would be tough. It would be tough. And they're not the only two, and neither are you, and neither are any of us. Let's go to our next slide, and we'll find out a little bit more. Some insight into that is because actually Lifeway did a study on that, and what they found out is polling about 200 U.S. Protestant pastors and then an additional 1,000 pastors, once they broke down these categories, what they discovered, and this may be a little hard to see with those percentages, so let me just give you the Cliff Notes version. There's going to be 4 dozen needs that are divided into 7 categories. Here's the categories: ministry difficulties, spiritual need, mental challenges, personal life, self-care, people dynamics, and areas of skill development. Those are the 7. Now listen to this. Almost 2 in 3 pastors say they are facing stress in ministry. That's 63%. For those of you that can't see that, I apologize for that graphic there. Nearly half, so 48%, cite discouragement and distraction as mental ministry challenges. Of those 7 categories that I just told you, 6% of pastors say mental challenges are currently the most challenging area for them, or the area that requires the most attention. So what they did is they broke down those areas even further. So now we have 5 categories under that mental ministry challenge category: depression, discouragement, distraction. Who's that sound like? Maybe Elijah a little bit. How about loneliness or lack of friendship, lack of contentment, and stress on top of that lack of contentment? And here's what the stats shake out to say: 28% of pastors report experiencing loneliness or lack of friendship. More than a quarter. That means you've probably met a pastor or two like that and don't even know it. 18% report, get this, depression. 17% cite lack of contentment. Another 14% aren't sure or say none of these are mental challenges for them. I say maybe they don't recognize it, or maybe some of them are afraid of losing their position, and it's probably a much lower number than that, and those numbers would change in the categories above. So most of these pastors maybe have set their expectations a little too high as well, just like Elijah, maybe those mountaintop experiences. He's ready to buy the farm. He's so depressed or so disillusioned or discontented, whatever you want to apply there, that we could maybe take those stats and take the things that Pastor Baker just pointed out and apply those to Elijah's life, even though it's a different time and a different setting. I understand that. And we may find out that he is dealing with the same thing that the ministry is dealing with today. Is it any wonder that he had this new plan to create the world's first non-profit ministry? Nothing? Yet non-profit? Different? Never mind. Okay. Bob got it. Thank you, Bob. I appreciate that. It is something that's facing pastors, but I'm going to really get a little bit into the weeds here with this, because I want to say this. I think it's a problem facing God-fearing pastors. I don't think it's just across the board with pastors. I think there is a difference in a profession and a calling. I'm convinced of it. I think that the God-fearing pastors, the ones that understand that they are a shepherd for us, they're the ones that struggle with this. I think it's why you can have some that create these mountaintop experience after mountaintop experience and find ways to maybe navigate that more and have those less frequent times off the mountaintop. And maybe they do okay, but I would also question, are they called, or have they just gotten really good at being a professional pastor? I'd rather have a called pastor, which we have, and somebody that I know wrestles with what's keeping me from relationship with God, that he worries about that and about your relationship with God for each and every one of you. If you don't have that in a pastor, I think you're in for trouble. But it also explains why, because we look and we go, wait a minute, and I'll single out Pastor Baker for a second, since he's the one with the longest comment of the night so far. Pastor here for 25 years, ministry 42 years? Did I have that right? Ministering 50, pastoring a total of 42 years. When you look at whether it's him or think of somebody else that may pop in your mind, you say, based on these stats, and if I could see this graph, Andy, I would probably be able to get on board with what you're saying. How do we even have real pastors today? How do we have really called men of God as pastors with these stats? Well, sometimes we don't. Sometimes maybe that's why the average pastor is in his position for 5 years and then he leaves. 50 years. Do you think he's called? I'd say he's probably called. There is a major difference. But don't make a mistake in thinking that these pastors, what wonderful men, we love them. They're our Elijahs. They don't make mistakes. They're infallible, and they are always on these mountaintop experiences. There is something at work there that we may not understand, battles and things that they have to deal with and things that they know about and they take in confidence, and we may not really realize until Pastor Appreciation Month at least comes up and we say, holy smokes, I cannot believe how he gets into the fray for me and what he does. So before we get too critical of what is happening to Elijah, when we kind of put in that context of how we see our pastors today, our real pastors, our men called of God pastors is who I'm talking about, then we realize, okay, I'm trying to get into the mindset of Elijah, of our pastors, and of the other example we'll talk about here in a minute. But since we got a little bit heavy, and because our Wednesday night Bible studies, aka Wednesday night Sunday school, are kind of known for getting into some deep stuff and sometimes heavy stuff, I want to show you a video real quick. We're going to make a game of it because we're going to see exactly the job of a pastor, the job of a prophet, the job of the apostles in a little clip that I want you to look at and go, which is the prophet? Which is the pastor in this clip? Do you have that clip ready? Let's watch it.
Can I pet that dog?
No.
Can I pet that dog?
No.
Can I pet that dog?
No, he's
Can I
sleeping.
pet that dog?
One of my all-time favorite videos. what does that have to do with anything I've talked about? Well, here's what it has to do with it. Who's the pastor or prophet in that video? It's not the bear. It's the mom, or whoever, the mom, the grandma, the big sister, whoever it is that's grabbing that hand, right? Don't pet the bear. That's all that prophets were doing. That's all that pastors are really doing. Stop trying to pet the bear. I don't know that it's a bear, though, and it's awful cute, and it looks fluffy. In fact, I think it's a dog. Can I pet that dog? Can I pet that dog? No, don't pet the dog, says the pastor. No, says the prophet, you can't pet it. It's not even a dog. Get away from it. What is the bear? Well, we can make the bear anything we want it in our lives. We could talk to maybe a number of pastors and find out that, well, that was their bear and that was their bear, and they're still trying to wrestle with the bear. I don't really know. But when we're talking about the prophets, that bear is whatever's keeping the people of Israel from covenant. He's saying, you are in danger. That's all Elijah was doing. You see, the prophets didn't come up with this whole little setup of, let's start really getting into people's business and telling them, knock it off, and you're bad, and God's mad at you. Let's get into that business. In fact, it was a tough business to get into. You had to be called to get into that business. It was tough for one thing because you had to have, what percentage of accuracy? Anybody know as a prophet? 100%. Now, just to put that in context today, everybody wants to talk about George Orwell. Great book, 1984. Most of us have probably read it in school. The predictions that we look at, we go, holy smokes, what was George Orwell, a time traveler? George Orwell only had about 34% correct in his predictions. That's still pretty impressive. However, George Orwell would have been stoned in those days. As a prophet, 100%. What does that mean, Andy? Well, what that means is they didn't even bother setting up a table at the job fair. They weren't going to recruit any prophets. There's only one recruiter for that anyway. And if he's not calling, you ain't getting the job. It made it pretty tough to be a prophet. Because God is telling them, you need to tell them to get back into covenant with me. Here's my message for them. I have an oracle for them, and here's what it's going to be. Bad news, it's judgment. Now, there's other oracles that also come along that say, this is the day of the Lord that's coming, and guess what? There's salvation. Nobody wanted to be a prophet. I'm pretty sure the guy that was walking around saying, I'd really like to break into that prophet business. If I could just get into that career field, I think I'd be okay. I don't think anybody was saying that, and I think if anybody did say that, they think he's either crazy or they would know right away that he wasn't called. It takes a special kind of calling for that. Stay away from that bear, say the prophets. Let's go to our next slide. When we look at exactly where Elijah has gone, we realize, he's come off that mountaintop, and that's tough. He's in a spot where he's seen these great victories. He's been at Carmel. He's had that Super Bowl win of a pagan showdown, that confrontation, and now he's thrown his Super Bowl ring on the ground and walked away from all of it. And he's going to make that distance. And as you look, you realize at the top there, and this is also on your outline, Jezreel in the north there in Israel, he leaves there, heads to Beersheba, but ultimately down to Mount Sinai. What's Mount Sinai? What's another name for it? The Mount of God, right? This was going to be a special place. What happened at Mount Sinai? Who else was there? Moses was there. It's where God gave the law, right? Kind of interesting, we're going to see this same trip. We're going to see some of these same connections to Moses yet again, just like we talked about as we finish up our Malachi study, another connection between Elijah and Moses that we might find pretty interesting. But another connection I want to make for you as we're talking about mountains, and as we're talking about coming off the mountaintops, we're going to jump over. We've got just a little bit of time, and I'll just recap this very briefly since we don't have a lot of time. But we talked early in this study about some of those events connected again to Elijah. And one of those early mentions we made was the Transfiguration. Everybody knows this event, and that's in Matthew 17 if you can't find it. And as you recall, they go up, and it's going to be Peter, James, and John. They're going to go up, and they're going to see this incredible event, something unprecedented in the history of creation. They're going to see this transfiguration, and it's going to be a pretty incredible event. They're going to see Jesus' face shine as the sun. And what happens? Anybody remember what Peter says when he stands up and he makes this declaration? Anybody remember what he says? Yeah, let's stay on this mountaintop. We have reached the apex. We have arrived. We don't ever have to leave here, right? I can relate to that feeling. How many have had that euphoric, pleasant sweetness that where you're just thinking, I could just go to heaven right now and be happy, right? And here he is on the mountaintop. I wouldn't want to come down either. But it's a foolish thing to say. In fact, it's so foolish. God actually interrupts him. The clouds cover, and all of a sudden this voice from heaven says, shut up. I mean, I'm transliterating a little bit, I get that. But here's what it says in verse 5 of Matthew 17. While he yet spake, behold, a great cloud overshadowed them, and behold, a voice out of the cloud. While he yet spake, a voice out of the cloud, which said, this is my beloved Son, in whom I'm well pleased, hear ye him. So in other words, I see that as, Peter, shut up, let him talk. This is a big deal, right? And so they hear it, and of course they fall on their face, they're afraid. Jesus has to go over and touch them. And something he tells them, a couple things he tells them, of course, they're coming down the mountain now, and he tells them, this is our little secret for now until after I am raised again. And so they're thinking, and one other thing I want to point out to you as you just make a little note, if you like, since we're short on time, when you're in verse 17 or chapter 17, verse 13 says this, because they ask this question. Ahead of verse 13, let me just fill you in. They ask this question. They say, okay, why is it that the scribes are saying that Elijah has to come first? It says Elias in your King James Version, but that's just the Greek way of saying the English version of Elijah. And so they say, why do they say Elijah has to come first? And Jesus, what does he tell them? That Elijah does come, that Elijah has come, that they didn't accept Elijah. And by the way, what they did to Elijah, they'll do to Jesus. And then verse 13 is where the Bible conveniently tells us that commentary, so we don't have to look very far. Then the disciples understood that he spake unto them of who? John the Baptist. We did a John the Baptist study, so you should be pretty refreshed on that. So that's very nice we have that commentary, but I don't think that's why the Holy Spirit put that in there completely. I think that the first four words are the key. Then they understood. Then they understood. I would hope they would understand, because after having their minds blown, being with Jesus, seeing him transfigured, seeing Moses and Elijah, can you imagine hearing an audible voice from heaven, even if it is telling you to shut your mouth? Wow. And now, where are you? You're dialed in. I'm convinced right now you are dialed in. And even though you wanted to stay on that mountaintop, your adrenaline is flowing. Everything in your brain, every cylinder is firing, I would think. And now they understand. I think that's why they put that in there. But here's something else they now had to understand, because they're about to face something. What happens after they come down from the mountain? What's the very next scene that we have in Matthew 17? Who knows it? Does anybody recall? The lunatic, the demon-possessed lunatic. And what has happened? The Father comes to Jesus. He's followed the chain of command. He went through all the proper channels. And what happened? He got no results. He said, your disciples couldn't do anything. So I want to see a manager. And now he's talking to Jesus. He went right to the top. Isn't that interesting? Now, put yourself in the position of those disciples, those three that were selected disciples, chosen to go up there. You are the inner circle. You got to be feeling pretty good, especially if you're not Peter, because God didn't tell you to shut up. You got to be feeling pretty good. And you come down that mountain, I feel really good. That was awesome. I hope we can do that again. That was sweet. And then you fail at something, immediately fail at something, but Jesus is able to do it. And of course, we know the rest of the story. Jesus says, when they come to him, how come we couldn't do it? What were we doing wrong? We don't understand. How did we fail? And he tells them, this has to be done. There's a little other language there, but that's a different study for another time. The long and short of it is you perverse generation. How long do I have to put up with all y'all? He says, this only happens through what? Prayer and fasting. Another study we could do another time, all in itself. The point is this, they had to face a defeat. Who has been on a mountaintop only to come down and have to go through the agony of defeat? Has anybody ever had a victory and then faced the agony of defeat? Only me? It's tough to do. You don't have to raise your hands. I don't want to embarrass you guys. It's tough to do. And here we have this same situation, again, involving Elijah. Now, he was already gone by the time Jesus touched them and told them to get up. But I almost wonder, did he see the rest of that scene? Maybe. And maybe he thought, I can relate to those guys. I remember what that's like. Have fun going to the mountain, boys. Have fun on the trip down. We come down off of that mountain, and that can be the toughest thing that we have to do because we want to savor that mountaintop experience. And when we get down off that mountain, that's difficult terrain. You can slip, you can twist your ankle, you can do all these other things, and that makes it so hard because we're wanting to stay on that mountaintop. Let's go to our last slide as we close out here. We'll go to verse 5 and just wrap it up with these last couple verses. Elijah's going to go on to sleep under that juniper tree, and behold, then an angel touched him and said unto him, Arise and eat. He's on the run. He feels like even more of a fugitive than he did in the past. So here he is, he's sitting under what they call a broom tree. So some of your translations may say broom tree. So just imagine about a 12-foot tree. We know what a juniper tree looks like. And so he's trying to get a little bit of shade, trying to rest. At least he's going to have a little time alone with God. And verse 6 says this, And he looked, and behold, there was a cake baking on the coals, and a cruse of water at his head. And he did eat and drink, and laid him down again. Well, he's probably exhausted. You refer back to that map and see exactly how tired he must be. And the angel of the Lord came again the second time and touched him and said, Arise and eat, because the journey is too great for thee. So Elijah has woke at the touch of this divine messenger. He's had that baked bread freshly prepared for him. He's got plenty of water. He's going to be refreshed. He doesn't get to return and go back to rest again. And so he's got this angel, and I assume it probably looked like a lot of the other angelic visits of the Old Testament, probably looked like a person. But verse 8 says this, and this is where we'll end for tonight. And he arose and did eat and drink, and went in the strength of that meat 40 days and 40 nights unto Horeb, the mount of God. That's another name for Sinai. So the Lord renews Elijah with a double portion, by the way. Gets to eat, rest. That's pretty nice. Because God's going to send him out again with another powerful mission. He's got to be prepared. What sounds familiar about the last part of verse 8, that 40 days and 40 nights on the way to Mount Sinai? What sounds familiar about that? We've got the 40 days and 40 nights that we might think of. And then how about that same trip? If we go back to the map for just a second, if we think of that journey made before by the Israelites with Moses, except that one took 40 years. But also similarly, what are they sustained by? That bread from heaven, that manna that God provides, and he sustains them on this journey. Elijah's going to have lessons to learn for 40 days. It's only, by the way, about 14 days is what it would take on foot to go the distance he went. But it's going to take 40 because God's got to teach these lessons to him. There's got to be an experience off the mountaintop. I know that was great, Elijah, but you're off the mountaintop now, and now it's going to be us. It's going to be time for your in-service, for your training, for some other things that I'm going to share with you and prepare you for because you are not done yet. I know you want to check out, but you don't get to check out yet. When we come off that mountaintop, it can be very, very difficult. So how do we apply that to our lives as we close out tonight? Well, we've learned a little bit about how the disciples must have experienced a little bit of that just like Elijah did. We can understand now that pastors and those in ministry, what they probably have to deal with more than we even realize. And now we think, how on earth, if a pastor, a prophet, and an apostle are struggling with this, how on earth am I going to get through this? I'm just a regular guy trying to come to church, trying to live right, trying to serve the Lord. If they're having these troubles, how on earth do I get through it? It can be intimidating. But I want to leave you with something because we have something special. We find in Psalm 94:18, it says this, When I said my foot slippeth, thy mercy, O Lord, held me up. Your mercy held me up. I don't have to worry about my foot slipping. If If you've ever come down a mountainside, you understand what kind of a problem that would be and what it would lead to. But he's there to hold you up when your foot slips. So if you wonder, how do I do that? I'm not a prophet. I'm not a pastor. I'm not an apostle. How do I do it? Psalm 94:18 is your answer. So we're understanding a little bit about what's gone into Elijah's mind, what he's thinking, what his mindset maybe is. We understand what all those other players are, and I'm glad Pastor made the comment that he did, because by now, Jezebel should have really faded into the background for us. This menacing, nasty villain should have gotten smaller and smaller in our minds, because the focus is on Elijah now. And now it's between Elijah and God. And what we're going to find as the story of Elijah continues, we're going to see exactly what the Lord has prepared him for and what that leads to, what it means for the nation, what it means for the historical timeline, and most importantly, what it means in our lives and how we apply it. And we're actually probably done kind of on time, unless there's any questions.
One thing I was going to say, Andy, is as I did a little history on Jezebel, that whole family was whacked.
Yeah, it's a tough family, yeah.
Her daughter, her son,
Yeah, yeah.
that's all demonic.
Yeah, absolutely, they were. Those pagan systems, and we can look at it today. Since you brought it up, and I'll just hold you for another minute to tell you this, I just caught a clip of something today where they were promoting this event at a park where this person was going to come in. You could sign your kids up for this, and it was going to be learning from the plants, which all sounded pretty good. The plant will be your teacher. But then you find out that the teacher that's coming in is somebody that's going to come in and tell them about Lilith and this demonic entity and how demons have had a bad rap and how through nature you can summon demons, and you can find out what your demon is and the attributes of your demon and how you can encourage your demon. Now, to us, that sounds so crazy twisted, right? Who on earth? But the same world that's telling you, you really are telling me that Jesus died and rose from the dead? You're really telling me that a prophet was swallowed by a great fish, or that the earth was made in 6 days, or whatever they want to point out. But they'll take their kid to this thing and try to conjure up these demonic entities. They'll say God isn't real, but these demons are. Paganism, to speak to Ron's point, that paganism, that demonism, that demonic influence creates such a delusion. Reality is completely bent. It's completely warped for them. And the longer they're in it, that strong delusion that comes in, the longer they get bent by it, the harder it is to pull them out of it. By the time Jezebel comes along, she's been in a culture, a family, a kingdom that has been completely saturated with these pagan ideas. And that's where we are today. We're seeing that influx of neo-paganism that's on the rise and what it's doing to our culture. So that's a very good point. Nasty family, another good study to look up sometime. Thanks for that, brother. All right. What's that?
There was plenty of haterism in that family.
Yeah, a lot of hatred. All right, well, that's good stuff. Any prayer requests we have tonight, we don't want to leave those out. They're always important. I have one that's going to be for a nephew that's getting ready to make a major change in his life and trying to work on some things, a lot of struggles. Both financial and otherwise. So if you'll remember him, his name is Stephen. If you'll remember him in your prayers, that prayer request comes from my sister, so I know it's okay to say. If we have nothing else and no other questions, don't forget your dollars and remember the valuable ministries that those are supporting. And without any further ado, I will see everybody Sunday. Thanks for listening. And in the meantime, remember to love each other.